Bitcoin values hit a lifetime high. Bitcoins are more expensive than gold. The Winklevoss twins have made a bid for an ETF based on Bitcoins. News like this has been making the headlines for quite some time now. Indian investors have also tried to join the party, hoping to flip a quick buck and make money on Bitcoins and other virtual cryptocurrencies. However, the regulatory framework for Bitcoins in India remains incomplete, with a risk that the story could sour and the headlines may well read Bitcoin. So with India yet to take a definitive stance on the legality or otherwise of Bitcoins, it is time to take stock of where we stand and what are the options before investors who are looking at this as a new asset class. Joining me today to discuss these issues is N.S. Napinai, advocate, Napinai and Company, Sandeep Goenka, COO and co-founder of Zebpay, a Bitcoin exchange, as well as Vishal Gupta, founder and CEO, searchtrade.com, a blockchain technology company. Thank you very much and welcome to the show. Lots of things to discuss, but Ms. Napinai, I'm going to come to you first and ask a very basic question which many people perhaps already know, but let's treat this as a show for people who do not understand this. Are Bitcoins legal tender in India?
No. The answer is as short as that.
Okay.
Legal tender necessarily means it has to be currency which has been issued by a sovereign state for it to get legal recognition. Here Bitcoin has been issued by an unknown private entity. Therefore, at that very threshold stage itself, it has stopped being legal tender.
Okay, and since it is not legal tender, I'm going to come to both of you, as participants in the actual, let's say, trading or facilitators around that. Let me come to you first and ask you about the same point. Many countries across the globe do not recognize Bitcoin as currency. Yet we see that there is significant interest in this. Are we operating in a regulatory grey zone as far as the framework in India is concerned?
So you asked that is Bitcoin legal tender, and yes, the answer is no. But if you ask is Bitcoin legal, then it is legal under all existing laws. It's not legal tender, but it is legal, which means that it can be classified as a commodity or a potential asset. So that's the difference. So again, when you said that Bitcoin is not considered currency in many other countries, again, maybe you're right, but Bitcoin is legal in most countries, including the US, Europe, Japan, Australia, most Western countries, Singapore. Bitcoin is legal. In different countries, it's classified differently because it's very difficult to classify Bitcoin in one pigeonhole, just like the way you cannot classify the internet as a TV broadcasting company or a newspaper. Right. Similarly, Bitcoin, it's very difficult to classify just as a currency or commodity or a payment network or a currency. It's many things at the same time.
It's a bit of a grey zone. Vishal, one would imagine that recognition is imperative to use Bitcoin as legal tender. Is that so, and where do we stand as far as India is concerned?
So recognition is important because what we have seen subsequently in India, we've got thousands of investors who are investing in Bitcoin with absolute no clarity about how they would identify Bitcoin in books of accounts. For example, is it a commodity, is it a stock, is it currency? Now when you don't have that clarity, it leads to all kind of taxation issues, right? So one is your income tax and second is your consumption tax, or what we call the VAT or the GST. Now once we do have that clarity, it will make life easier for investors and I think give them a higher level of protection, so to speak.
Why don't we have that clarity so far?
Well, the fact is that we don't have it. It's only India which has this opacity in those countries where there has been substantial recognition otherwise of interplay of Bitcoin with regular currency. To go a little bit into the history before I come to the current situation, as he rightly pointed out, US has accepted it as currency, though not as legal tender. They have distinguished it as a financial service. There are many instances where...
A financial instrument, you mean?
Financial services being rendered.
Okay, services being rendered. Okay.
So, for instance, the issue that came up before one court was that would sale of Bitcoins be a commodity amenable to GST?
Okay.
And the court said no, GST would necessarily mean transfer of goods, whereas here it is of a financial service.
Okay, this is in the context of the United States, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
So given this background, one thing that comes out is that you know that bitcoins exist, or for that matter I would take it into a broader perspective of cryptocurrency. You know cryptocurrencies exist, you are pushing for a digital world today. You would necessarily have to take into account the fact that this is there. You have to take a definitive stand on it. The law as it stands today, if I could clarify that before we move to what we ought to have, is that we have RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, deciding what would be acceptable currencies for trading within India.
Absolutely, and this is an important point for our viewers to take note of. India's stance, what our experts here are telling us, that India has not yet taken a definitive stance about bitcoins, whether they are illegal or legal, what should their nature be, what should their tax treatment be, how do they classify it as an asset class, in which basket it goes in. And you were referring to the Reserve Bank of India and possibly making reference to the 2013 and 14 circulars. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So in fact, the Reserve Bank has the right to decide on the legal tender. Reserve Bank also decides on recognition. Pursuant to that, it had issued a cautionary note in 2013 saying that we have noted that there is a lot of transactions in bitcoins and people have been warned that there has not been a definitive stand. Then the master circular is issued in 2014 for prepaid instruments. So technically one could say that Bitcoin also falls within the open system of prepaid instruments. In that master circular, what RBI has decided is that only banks have the right to issue prepaid instruments which are closed, open or semi-closed. So therefore, having restricted it to banks, what RBI goes on to say is that private parties can issue certain kinds of prepaid instruments.
So, Sandeep, is that how Bitcoin trading, purchasing, selling is happening in India? Is that the framework under which it is happening at the moment?
No, not really. So maybe the master circular says that this can be issued by banks, but I mean Bitcoin is not really issued by anybody. It's issued on a decentralized network.
Exactly, that's the nature of the technology.
All that we are doing is we are facilitating people who want to buy and sell Bitcoins. Really. So I don't think.
So what legal framework do you operate under, for instance, if I may ask you that?
So it definitely is a little bit grey, but it's a commodity.
But you would.
It's any other asset.
It's not illegal, right?
It's not illegal. So, for example, Nishit Desai Associates, which is a prominent law firm, has released a white paper which says that Bitcoin is legal under all existing laws. And the RBI also has released warning circulars, as she said. It's not a letter saying that it's illegal. It's a warning to the general public. It doesn't mention that Bitcoin is illegal.
Vishal, I want you to come in, and while you do that, therefore, if I were to seek recognition of Bitcoins as a holding that I may have or anywhere else in the chain, I assume because of this grey area that would be difficult at this point of time.
So it's not difficult. It's about government having greater learning of what Bitcoin is and greater understanding of the technology. Because what
is
Bitcoin,
anyone in government attempting that learning?
I presume, I hope so. So I mean,
so you wanted to come in, yeah.
So I think just recently there was a report on another TV channel that there's an inter-ministerial committee which is being set up in Delhi. The RBI for sure knows us. We've written to the RBI proactively, and right now they've mentioned that Bitcoin is not a currency. That's the response we've got from them. Nothing else. So absolutely the government is tracking. It's a new technology. It takes time for them to understand and appreciate what it is. We are making efforts, and I'm sure they're tracking it. Maybe it's a little too early for them.
Go ahead. And then
the problem really is the nature of the beast, right? So it's a peer-to-peer technology. So there is no individual entity or organization or server that runs Bitcoin. So now if you're going to regulate Bitcoin, how are you going to enforce the regulations, and under what premise are you going to allow people to operate and use, buy, sell, and do other things with Bitcoin, or maybe create financial instruments? So there are all kind of subjects that open up. And hopefully, with communication and learning, government can come to a better conclusion at some point.
Yeah.
There are two aspects to the question that you asked. So how are people dealing in Bitcoins today? So virtual currency, which is what it falls within the broad category, is predominantly driven through contractual terms. So it's issued by a private party. The private party sets out the contractual terms which will regulate how you can use this so-called currency. I'm using currency here in a very loose sense here. And those terms decide what the user can put that money to.
So the question that I have in mind is that if pretty much any trading activity in India, if any deposit raising activity in India, if everything is regulated, including commodities, and we saw in a recent example how retrospectively the regulation was changed, how do bitcoins fit in?
In fact, it is high time that they do fit in bitcoins. It would have taken a very simple clarification in the Master Circular of 2014 to say yes, bitcoins or similar cryptocurrencies are legal and falls within an open.
Why is the RBI not clarifying it?
Because it's too small for them, and then, we are waiting for precedents happening in other countries also.
So when you say it is too small, I have to interrupt you. Give us a sense of volumes. Does anyone have data about what is the total sort of Bitcoin purchase, selling, trading volume in India?
Sure, we have an exchange, and I mean, I am trying to be modest, but I think we are one of the leading exchanges in India, and we do about 200 crores worth of trade in a month. So I think as of right now, it's a 2,000 crore annual industry, which was only 200 crores last year. So I think this is the first year where it makes sense for the regulators to have a look at it. And also coming to the point that how users should use it and all. I mean, I think all our users are very simple. You can buy and sell bitcoins and just simply show it as an asset on your books and pay short-term or long-term capital gain when you sell bitcoins. That's what all our chartered accountants, CAs and all the advice that we've got.
So the people who are doing that, I imagine people would have been doing that.
Yes.
How is the tax treatment happening?
You pay short-term and long-term capital gain depending upon the period.
And no more questions asked by the taxman?
Well, I think it's the first year where people would be declaring it.
No, merely because you're being taxed for a particular transaction does not give it legality or otherwise. Okay. I'm not saying that it is illegal. I'm just saying that that is not the threshold or the basis on which you decide this. You have to go by specific regulations which are dealing with virtual currencies.
So my point here is from 200 to 2000, a growth of 10x in 1 year is not a small number. So while Sandeep said it's probably small for the RBI's attention, it has been caught up with so many other things. I think 2,000 crore is not a small number.
Certainly not, and if it is coming in small transactions, that means that a large number of Indians are involved in it. So it is high time that they regulate it.
The problem really is that's really why we asked the question about the legality of Bitcoin, because now, like I mentioned earlier, you got so many people, you've got some level of Bitcoin holding, and they have absolutely no idea, where they stand in terms of their investment. And so the term legality or illegality is, I mean, that's where it originates out of.
That's fascinating. People who are putting in money, and we'll come to the prices later on, have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah, if I may just quickly add over here, since this was such a complex issue, I have actually addressed it in my book, Technology Laws Decoded, which is going to be out in the market.
So let's try and decode that in the next available time that we have. The next subject that we want to bring up for discussion is that we have heard the numbers from people who know this very well. 2,000 crore, if that were to be indexed over our population, it is absolutely nothing. But it is a significant amount of money, and therefore we ask the question, should you say yes or no to bitcoins? If they are not a substitute for normal currency, the question that therefore arises is, how are the prices being discovered? Let's assume for a moment that there is nothing wrong in trading, buying, selling, doing whatever you want to do with your money, whether it be Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency. How are Bitcoin prices being discovered?
So the Bitcoin prices are discovered like price of any other commodities are discovered. Now, just because the volumes are lower, just like you had 50s and 60s where the oil price was really volatile, the consumption was low, so little larger purchase would fluctuate the price dramatically. So similarly in Bitcoin, because it's still a new commodity or a system that people are working with, and the amount of capital that moves is probably about $250 million worth of Bitcoin get traded around the world today. So the
250 million per day. Okay.
Now that essentially means that any large investor who walks in with 10 or 15 million can have a dramatic impact by either buying or selling on the price of Bitcoin. So as the volume grows, as the market capitalization grows, you will see more stability in price of Bitcoin over time.
So doesn't it raise the next question, which some people have expressed, concerns of price manipulation? Are they valid? And the second point really that comes to mind is that does it mean that there is need for a central authority or an oversight mechanism, both from a point of view of ensuring fair trading, protection of consumer rights and grievance redressal?
So, when you consider about like things like insider trading, which is applicable to stock prices, in Bitcoin, the news is out there open for everybody. Okay.
Right.
So if you think that the prices are manipulated, you have the option of not to participate in the market.
Okay.
So prices are determined on exchanges like ours, where demand and supply meet and a common price is determined, and it happens globally on exchanges worldwide. I don't think there is any need, because there is no hidden information in the Bitcoin world which somebody would have or somebody would not.
So what you seem to be suggesting is that if someone is buying a particular commodity or a good on an e-commerce website and there is a price listed, it is for him or her to buy or not buy.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You wanted to?
Yeah, I wanted to come in on a slightly different angle. The difficulty with regulating something like Bitcoin is of jurisdiction or territoriality. So it's not bound by one territory. So who's going to regulate it then? Who are you going to regulate? Because even the person who has created
but isn't
this,
that quite simple to answer? Sorry, isn't it simple to answer? Because there are asset classes in which Indians sitting in India, domiciled in India for tax and other purposes, are participating, buying and selling contracts.
Yes.
And futures in overseas domains.
So therefore, that is the transaction which you're regulating and not the product itself.
So there are two challenges here, right? So one is, can we frame regulations? So one is creating a regulation, and second is enforcing the regulation. So I think creating the regulation is the easy part. Enforcing of those regulations, because we are moving away from the physical world and moving into digital
but
world.
you make the point that we first need to create that regulation, right?
Absolutely.
You're not saying it has to be unregulated.
So you cannot ever regulate Bitcoin itself. What you want to regulate is businesses who work with Bitcoin.
Yes, it's
Just
the
like you cannot
transaction
regulate
that you
gold.
would have to necessarily regulate.
Absolutely. Just like you cannot regulate gold, but you would regulate gold businesses, right?
And what about redressal?
One other aspect which you raised is about this central agency.
Oversight.
So the beauty about Bitcoin, and that is something which everybody has consensus over, is the technology which drives it called blockchain technology.
Yes.
So it's so trustworthy that banks today want to adopt it.
Okay, so there is no question of a false trade or a mistaken punch in which causes you, which then needs to be settled.
So there are two layers here. So one, you have the default blockchain layer, which of course is completely trust based, and there is nothing that can go wrong, because there are about 340,000 machines actively connected to the network, and as long as 51% of those machines don't agree on something, nothing gets done.
Okay.
And the second part is businesses that create a second layer which allow users to come and buy or sell Bitcoin, and how they go about managing their business, and that's essentially where the regulations are primarily required. So,
Yeah, go ahead.
No, so according to me, all existing laws take care of, if any businesses, Bitcoin businesses, like for example ours, falter, existing regulation is enough to keep us in check. If we do not deliver Bitcoins, for example.
But wouldn't a proper regulatory framework and a stamp of approval from the, let's say, the Reserve Bank of India, backed by the fiscal policy administrators, mean that instead of 10x, you could see a 100x jump in volume?
Absolutely. I mean, we are waiting for that. We are advocating for that. And there are already...
How are you advocating? Are you guys meeting the government, the RBI? What are you guys doing there?
So in all fintech events, we are there, and we are proactively saying that this is a volume, so that we attract attention. We are of course writing to all the agencies. RBI knows us. They know we exist, and we are trying to meet all regulators and authorities possible at the right time. I think they were really busy over the last few months, and we were really small. But I think the time is kind of now.
Well, that is true. They were demonetizing our currency. On that point, let's take a look at another interesting aspect, and this is Bitcoin volumes by markets and by currency across the world. Sandeep here spoke about his agency, and also the fact that volumes in India are around at 2,000 crore. But let's take a look at some of these. The Japanese, and perhaps it is just a factor of the volume of money that they have surplus and the negative interest rate scenario. The Japanese exchange has the highest percentage by volume of total Bitcoin, around 27% if you were to take the most recently available data by volume. And then if you look at the US dollar, if you look at the US, it's around 22% if you aggregate it across multiple exchanges in the United States. By currency, again, it's the yen which dominates, followed by the US dollar, and then the euro and the yuan also, which is perhaps an expression of the availability of surpluses and the chase for high returns, if I may say, that people have. That brings me to another point, and this is price volatility. Interesting bit of data that is publicly available, which says that around 2011, each Bitcoin was available at $5. In a couple of years after that, it went to almost $1,000. By early 2015, it fell to $200. 4th of January 2017, it went up to $1,140. A week later, it was down again by 30%. Now, I'm going to come to you on this. This doesn't tell me, this kind of volatility doesn't tell me that this is a safe asset class. If I was in the business of giving any tips and recommendations, which I am not completely, I would say stay away.
So one is that out of all the data that you mentioned, I'm just proud to say that Zebpay is now among the top 30 exchanges in the world, and we are targeting to be among the top 10. Really get India on the radar, the Bitcoin radar out there. The second thing is, I'm not also advocating you should not invest in anything which you don't understand, but Bitcoin has been the best performing asset every year except 1 year, that is 2014, since its invention. So I think it's for the users to take a call. The volatility that you expressed, as Vishal mentioned earlier, is because in a couple of years back, Bitcoin was a very small market cap asset. It was first $1 million industry, then $100 million. As of right now, it's about between 16 to $20 billion. The volatility index was 15. So if you see btcvol.info, it's a website which you can see the volatility. From there, it went down all the way to 2. So over almost the last half of the second half of the last year, it was down to 2. Right now, it's again back to about 3 to 4. It's not as volatile as you kind of make out to be. It's now as volatile as some of the more volatile currency pairs out there, maybe some Latin American currencies out there. Still, it's just a $20 billion industry. Once it becomes a $200 billion industry, maybe a $2 trillion industry, the volatility will come down as more players get involved in the market.
So, Shal, isn't this... go ahead.
So, this is what we got to understand. There are only going to be 21 million Bitcoins that are ever going to exist, and 16.5 million of them have already been mined. So, as the number...
my next question, exactly.
So, now... what we end up is in a situation is that because there is limited resource, and as more and more users or investors come on board and they want to own a piece of Bitcoin, so there is greater demand for lesser commodity, and so
price discovery, then again, I'm challenging you on this. You guys know it better. Price discovery can never be fundamentally true in such a market where the end product volume is already known.
So that's pretty much the case for all commodities on the planet.
That's for gold as well. You almost know the amount of gold that's there and which will be mined every year.
The absolute data available, amount of gold that can be mined and is mined and will be mined.
And oil actually.
So if the upper limit is being reached, prices will only rise therefore.
That's the whole point. So that's a fundamental
then that is why you have regulations. So that is why government decides how much can be mined in a particular way and how is it to be sold. There is some level of stability that a legal tender provides.
But then if the volume is known, the only thing that will change is value. The volume of the product is already known.
Exactly. And yes. Bitcoin is divisible up to 8 decimals. So you can go up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 0.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 Bitcoin. So they're extremely divisible. So as more and more people want to own Bitcoin and the desirability of owning maybe some Bitcoin increases amongst users, the prices, in my opinion, theoretically speaking, are likely to keep rising.
Absolutely. So even on Zebpay, you can own a fraction of a Bitcoin, you know, I mean, with any exchange.
Well, at these prices, most certainly only fractions.
Yes, but there is another bit of concern on the aspect of Bitcoins being completely frozen in terms of volume. I'm a little skeptical about it, because the way Bitcoins have evolved have been by some Bitcoins being released periodically for free.
No.
Or for certain...
no, that's not the case. So we have something called, we call it a block discovery.
Yes.
So put a very simple in a 1 minute analogy. So if there was a cricket match and you had one scorekeeper, and if the scorekeeper were to make a mistake, the result of the match could, you know, just completely go kaput. So how do you solve that problem? You put, instead of 11 scorekeepers. Now there is a problem. Why would 11 scorekeepers participate? So you have to create an incentive. So what Bitcoin has done is created a system where 11 scorekeepers come together, and at the end of each over, whoever discovers the master score sheet is the one who's going to be rewarded some Bitcoins, and that's how Bitcoins come into existence.
Right.
And this is the process that is called as mining, actually.
Absolutely.
And therefore, it cannot be claimed that it is frozen, really.
Right.
So you have here a situation where you have something called which they want to call a currency, which can keep coming into being as and when the person who has the right to create it can bring it out into the open. So it's an unknown person out there.
Quickly.
So this will go on until the number 21 million is going to be reached. Now, how do we assure that number 21 is going to remain 21? Because earlier I said 340,000 machines running the same software. Just like you have your application mobile phone, it can't be updated until you decided to. So think of that code or software as a rule book that everybody's accepted. And as long as if I can create my own version of blockchain for Bitcoin, and I can take the number from 21 to 25 million, but I will have to get 51% of miners or witnesses to agree to that change for that number to go from 21 to 25.
Fascinating stuff. Sandeep, the last word to you completely.
No, these are all technical things which I think I kind of believe that as a user, I think you need to be absolutely rest assured that there will be a limited number.
Right.
And we had a monetary system which was based on gold for 5,000 years, which worked fantastically. And Bitcoin in some way is more similar to that monetary system. That's all.
So that's the world of cryptocurrencies for you. If you're someone who's been looking at Bitcoins, here was a ready reckoner, short ready reckoner as to where it stands and what you can do. And if you're looking for buying Bitcoins, or at least the fractions of it, do take a chance, but keep all the risks in mind as you chase higher rewards. With that, it's a wrap on this show. Thank you for watching.